One of the salient characteristics of dominance in human societies is that it is the subject of virtually endless discussion, investigation, and of course controversy. Perhaps there is no better indication of its central place in the species' constellation of preoccupations. And at the very least, the content of this video demonstrates that humans do not treat the matter of dominance casually. Hi, I am Dei-Rasi and welcome to part 2 of how to be dominant and have social power. Stay tuned because there will be more right after this. Hey, welcome back and let's jump right in. But just before we do that, please, I'm asking you to hit that subscribe button, click the bell notification icon, give a like to this video. Let me hear your thoughts down below. So hey guys, let's get started. Picking up from part 1, we're looking now at exerting social pressure. And this is a real beauty because dominant men can create social tension at will. And I say dominant men, but there are also dominant women who can create social tension at will. What they will do is that they'll create social tension to make the more submissive individuals comply, crack, speak, or act. But sometimes they create that tension without an actual reason, just for the fun of wielding power and seeing someone else squeak. And of course to show who's really in charge. Alright, number 2, social aggression. Now, a dramatic example of creating tension is the very famous "How am I funny" scene in Goodfellas. Here you will see that Tommy, who's an example of a meathead, a dominant style meathead as a matter of fact, he uses intimidatory looks, a loud voice. A real life check here, everybody, is that social pressure is great and you can play around with it. Now the example above of course was extreme, and you only want to use this type of frame dominance when people are being highly disrespectful and you need to draw a proverbial power line in the sand. Number 2, silences plus the inquisitive look. Denzel Washington uses this one quite often, including a few times in the movie Training Day. The dynamics of who creates tension and who suffers under tension are an important indicator of who is in charge in a relationship. Now, here's an example from an ex-girlfriend of mine. Now, as you can see, I hadn't started out with the aim of creating tension, but I had noticed that she was putting pressure on herself. So what I did was just added that sideways glance and stern look to see how far she would go. And that exchange told me a lot about where we stood at that time, such as she was way more into me than I thought, and I was the more dominant person in the relationship than I had previously thought. Real life check here, everybody, is that this is a very powerful technique that can be used in a friendly and a joking way as well. When you can be dominant while half joking and while still being friendly, that is pure gold. Dominant signs delivered in a half joking fashion have all the upsides with very little downside. So I highly recommend you learn it and start using it in your daily life. The next one is fewer words and more non-verbal. The laws of social effort says that those who give less and take more are more powerful. You can also check the law of social exchange. This also applies to communication as well. People who have lots of social power use fewer words and of course more non-verbal gestures. They would use more facial expression, they would also use more dominant hand gestures, and there is nothing more powerful than directing other people's behavior without words. Hand gestures can be used either to defend your right of speaking without stopping or to make someone else speak. Now this one is about facial expressions power move. You need to watch out for this one because judging or socially attacking with facial expressions only can be passive aggressive instead of being dominant. It becomes a sign of dominance when talking directly and openly would be out of place, not possible, or way too confrontational. Basically, think it like this. In a situation where most people would have pretended to go along with the flow, the socially powerful individual still allows himself to pass judgment. Now this is a task for you. Most people use way too little nonverbal. You should try to increase your use of facial expressions and gestures. Joining an acting class is a good way of increasing your nonverbal repertoire. Next one, dominant touching. There are several studies showing that people who touch others more are perceived as more dominant. Different ways of touching convey different levels of dominance, of course. Backslapping or light punches on the shoulder while laughing and drinking, for example, they tend to be very juvenile and not very dominant. Touching someone's face instead is very dominant. Naturally, of course, ensure that you do these things within context, else you may come off looking as a creep. How you can do this? 1. Parenting style touch. When one individual takes a parent role in a relationship, it often pushes the other party into a baby role. And of course, the parent is the role with the most social power. Touches that signal a parent role, these may include patting on the head, cheek pinching, face touching. Sheryl Sandberg, the author of Lean In, complains of patriarchy in the workplace and shares the story of a congressman who patted her on the head and asked, "What are you, a pom-pom girl?" That was an attempt of taking the power role, father role in the relationship. Naturally, this one is very good for a man to do to a woman because it places him as the dominant father figure while still showing caring attitude. Most of the times when people touch your face, they are communicating that they are in charge. But it can also be used in a friendly way to communicate you are taking care of someone. The Godfather communicates, "I care about you," but it's still delivered from a dominant position. This is the pinnacle of mixing power with warmth. Next one, a power hug. The real life check, everyone, is to avoid this one if you're older than 20 years old and sober. It is rather juvenile and downright annoying. It is also easy to remove your arm and make you look overly aggressive. Here's the next one, aggression, assertion, and punishment. The continuum of aggression is usually understood as going from submission to assertiveness to aggression. Dominant men are rarely on the submissive side, of course. The most socially adroit ones are on the assertion side, but they also know how to cope with aggression, and in the rare cases when it's needed, they can also cross into aggression. But this is not to say I am recommending anyone to be aggressive. And as we're coming down nicely, this one now, touching or taking your property. Dominant men allow themselves to touch or take other people's property. And even if done in jest, it is as if to say, "You're below me, so I can touch your stuff." And the moment you let them touch your property at will, you are communicating that you approve of that power relationship. How do you beat property invasions? It is either you don't let them take your things or become more liberal about property and act the same way towards their property. You might not be comfortable doing it, but do it anyway. If they complain, that's also great. You have just created a precedence when it will be okay for you to complain when they touch your stuff again. The most dominant individuals, instead, they act swiftly on personal space encroachment and do so very openly. So, defending one's territory and space is a sign of dominance, a sign of confidence and social power. This point now is about commanding attention. The more socially dominant individual commands attention. Individuals with great social power are not necessarily flashy, and often they are not, but people tend to gravitate towards them by virtue of their power, authority, or status. People also tend to pay more attention when the most socially dominant man speaks or when he enters the room. Last point, the buck stops at dominant men. It's especially when the going gets tough that the attention naturally turns towards the most dominant individuals. People seek answers, they want wisdom, and they want someone to make them feel calm, and they turn to the real leader. In these cases, it's less about physical dominance and more about experience, leadership, competence, and intellectual dominance. Look at this scene from The Godfather. Of course, they pulled him back in. It's because people naturally turn towards the real leader when they are lost or when they're in trouble. This is the leader's burden. People will look to you and they will expect you to be there, and it's also your duty to help. That's the leader's burden. So in summary, there's much that you can do to be seen as more socially dominant and powerful. And everywhere you turn, someone is talking about leadership and about dominance, power, and status. And you can start developing being a good leader by trying some of these fail-safe methods that we have covered in this video. If this is your first time here, please, I'm asking you to hit that subscribe button. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Also, like this video, share with a friend, and come back because there will be more right here on this channel. Continue being dominant. I can't wait to see you in the next video. You could also give me your suggestions on topics that you want me to cover down in the comment section. Everybody, please, I know that the world has been turned upside down, so you be safe. You have been awesome. I have been Dei-Rasi. Walk good.